Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to this morning's live. For this morning, what I wanted to do was to revisit one of the topics that we actually started off with back in April. And I've invited Michael Keane, my good friend, back to chat to us, just to revisit the topic of, how to adapt your home so that the changes you make not only make your home look good, but make you feel good too, which is so important. And I think as we move through these stages now coming out of lockdown, I know myself personally, I'm actually finding it nearly getting more stressful. Things are starting to get much, much busier and you're struggling to adapt. And we've also been spending so much time at home. So for many people, it can be quite overwhelming. So we put together a little survey, which thank you so much to all of you who filled it out. And it's been absolutely fascinating. And what we're going to do is take a little bit of time to go through those results. But I suppose for me, one of the most striking things that came out of the survey was that nearly 70% of people were planning on changing their home since lockdown. So it's a huge amount of people. And almost the same percentage again had completely changed how they were using their home. So it makes an awful lot of sense, but it means there's a lot of people planning to make changes now. So it's a really good time to sort of, let's sit back, let's think about what we really want, how do we want to live in the future, and make changes that are going to enhance your quality of life, which is ultimately what you want. And just to say as well, if you are planning on any kind of change at all, even if it is really small, just to remind you about our weekly tracker workbook, which is a really simple tool that you can download from our website. It's just a little workbook, and the idea behind it is that you would track a typical week at home. So this might be a really interesting exercise to do now that, you've been spending so much time at home. You might be using your home in a totally different way. And what it does is it just highlights areas that aren't working, will highlight what is working, and hopefully help you then to make the best choices and prioritize where to invest and where to improve your home. So I'm going to invite Michael to join now. Get this to work. There we go. Wonderful. And again, I'll leave the link to the survey in our bios. If anyone does want to go ahead and complete that, please do, because I'll be checking it throughout the live. So even if you want to pop ahead and do that, then we can chat about that again. So let's see. There we go. Is that Michael? Hi, Michael. Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me? I can't hear you, Michael. I use that. I'm hearing something there with the mic. It might just be. Oops. No.
Hear me
Sorry
now?
about this, guys. Oh, perfect. Yes. Yes.
Great.
Loud and clear. Loud and clear. Fantastic. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm well, thanks. You too. Thanks a million for having me on.
Not at all, not at all. My pleasure. And thank you for coming back. I was
No
just saying in
worries.
the intro, Michael, I'm finding it personally kind of a stressful time, as things
Mhm.
start to get busy. And I guess I hadn't appreciated how almost everything would nearly start up again altogether. So that was
Mhm.
something that, having come through a period where things had slowed down so much. And I guess for a lot of people that I'm talking to are sort of feeling the same way.
Mhm.
And just that we'd put together a small survey because I just thought, well, look, now's an ideal time to start checking in with people, see how they're doing at home, and some fascinating results, which we might go through in
Sure.
a bit. But yeah, no, it's been very, very interesting. So I guess, one of the nicest things that's happened out of all of this is that we've all we've slowed down, but we've gotten used to living with an awful lot less. Um, and oh, Michael, I think there we go. The joys of live
Yeah.
broadcasting. But yeah, we've gotten used to living with less. And I think for a lot of people, that's been really great because, I think we've talked about this before. One of the major causes of stress is too much stuff. It's having too much stuff. And just that idea that we can pare back. Actually, you know what? We're an awful lot happier without it. And one of the girls actually sent me an article that we've reached, I don't know, absolute stuff capacity, and that there's an issue now with landfill. So just, really interesting. And I knew you had a lot of insights into why clutter is so stressful. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think more broadly, if I can start off just slightly more broadly than that, we need to see, I would encourage people to take a sort of a gentle approach. That would be the first thing I would say, is that we have a tendency to feel like we should always be getting a lot done. And it's a sort of a malaise of the 21st century that everything needs to be super efficient. And this relates to automation and all sorts of things. But the first thing I would say is that people need to be a bit more self-compassionate and a bit more gentle with themselves. That's a good starting point. And then when the lockdown came along, everybody had lockdown projects, and there was excitement and novelty at the beginning. And and of course people will do everything, and everyone was all on board, and it was frontline workers this, and what can I do? And then the novelty wore off, and people were sort of losing a little bit of sense of what they should be doing. And this is the problem we see now with the masks, etc. Nobody really knows exactly what to do because it's not clear, and there's no novelty. But the biggest concern in all of this is uncertainty, and uncertainty is a big stressor.
Yeah.
So we can start by accepting that, first of all, that we're not sure what's going to happen, and we're not sure what's going to happen with work or school or the creche or home or anything. When am I going to get this room back? When am I going to have a normal life back? The fact is we don't know. And a lot of media attention, or whatever way you consume your media, is used up with telling you that we can create certainty because that's what people are craving. Even if it's something I'm not really keen on, at least I know. And that's what people are drawn towards, that kind of headline, as it were. So we don't know. The scientific facts of the matter is the vaccine is quite difficult to make. We don't know how the coronavirus affects different things. We just don't know, and that uncertainty exists. So with uncertainty then comes a heightened awareness and a heightened level of arousal that basically colors everything you do, because you feel maybe a slight bit more stressed. And that's not necessarily conscious. We need to also be aware of that people can just be a little bit more stressed. And to get more specific about it in terms of clutter, clutter demands attention because it's information for your brain to process. And this is leaving aside finding things or, where you left your keys or all that kind of thing. But just by its physical nature, clutter takes up information space in your brain. And we often think about your brain like a computer, and every time something's happening, an app is being turned on or a program is running, and you have a certain amount of bandwidth. And you can fill that up in whatever way you like. And uncertainty fills a lot of it and takes a lot of the mental space. And then clutter takes more of it. So the more of that bandwidth you're taking, the less you have for being creative or problem solving or being emotionally resilient or being nice to your family or reacting with resilience to stressors or whatever it is. And that's leaving aside all the difficulties, the practical difficulties that come with clutter. So I don't know anybody, and I include members of my own family in this, who don't feel better after clearing clutter out.
Definitely, yeah.
Lots of people say they can deal with it.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in my mother-in-law's physio practice at the moment. There's a lot of things around me. And, you know, I don't know anybody who doesn't enjoy the clearing up. And that's because there's some part of you up here that gets a bit of free space to it as well.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's absolutely, and you know, you almost get that sense that the space or the house heaves a sigh of relief as well. So it's actually you, it's you. But it's really interesting, I think, what you're saying about that uncertainty. And I know, like I've experienced this a lot, say myself with clients, where you give them too much choice, it's overwhelming and it's just impossible to make a decision. So that sort of uncertainty hangs over you. So maybe for people thinking about making changes and stuff, that making a decision to try and set themselves up so that decision process is as easy as possible will probably alleviate an awful lot of stress for people.
Yeah, and that decision needs to be informed. And you and I have discussed this 1,000 times. It's the solution to these things is personal.
Yeah,
and personal is not, I can't create a million personal products in one go. I can create a cream, or I can create this, or I can create a car, and I can create millions of those in one go, and that's quite scalable. And again, that's a story that's always been told to us, that we can scale this up, or you see this thing, if you just had that one particular type of thing, that would suit you and you'd be happy. But unfortunately, or fortunately, every single person is different, and what looks good to you may not necessarily work for you, because you have that sort of uniqueness about you. So looking for that one-stop shop approach to, well, if I want that thing and that's going to sort me out, that's not really worthwhile. So this is where we need to start taking into account personal preferences. But then, as you say, too much choice becomes uncertainty. And too much choice then paradoxically becomes another stressor. I mean, I bought a pair of runners recently. We were on in a shopping centre. There were 4 shoe shops, all just specialising in runners. And I mean, it's just the most stressful thing. Because if I buy this pair, maybe in the other shop they have a pair that are slightly better that I'm going to prefer. It's called the paradox of choice. Whereas what I need is somebody to tell me.
Yes, exactly.
These are the ones that here are 3. Pick one of those 3. And that's where knowing the person comes in. And that's where you and I have been talking about these surveys. Trying to get a sense of how you want to live and who you are. And then the expert can help you.
And that
say,
is,
right, you know what would work for you.
Exactly. It's so critical. And I guess for us, our starting point is trying to learn as much about the person we're working with as possible, because you're absolutely right. It's not a one size fits all approach. It's not what your next door neighbor has, or your sister, or whoever it might be is not going to solve the problem. It really needs to work for you. And I guess that's why we're always struggling to try and get people to try out the weekly tracker, to track their own week at home, and it is incredible the insights that it provides for them. So fascinating. And then as well, you talk a lot about trusting your gut and going with that gut instinct, and why that's so important. And I mean, that is just so true, but we ignore it all the time, but really there's good reason that people feel a certain way, and their reactions are so strong.
But it's about allowing that to happen. It's about trusting yourself that we often talk about a wet Wednesday morning. What's this going to be like on a wet Wednesday? It's lovely on a sunny Saturday morning. What's this like on a wet Wednesday when you have to get up at 5:30 for work, and things aren't perfect? Is it going to work for you? And that's really where the personal, the design through understanding people becomes key.
Yeah.
What's the life you want to live?
Yeah.
And what kind of behaviors do you want to engage in? Because most of our behaviors are automatic anyway, and they're driven by the environment. So why not create an environment that's going to drive behaviors, or a life that you want to live, rather than having to constantly cut through the noise of your environment to get to where you want to go to, or be driven off in another direction.
Yeah.
And that's the key to design, right? I mean, it's designing for life. I mean, that's the ultimate goal.
Definitely. And, really interesting, I think, across all industries, there's just now been an absolute turnaround where people are so much more focused about whatever it is that they're purchasing or spending their money on. The impact that that has on how it makes them feel is way more important than how it makes them look or how it makes the space look or their homes look. And I think that's an amazing revelation for people, because it's something that I've been so passionate about for so long. But particularly with design, aesthetics can take over, and people can get totally hung up on that and not think about, hang on a minute, what kind of environment am I trying to create here? And really, that has to be the starting point. That has to be the essence. And everything else is nearly no, it's not. It's not. And I think that's where the gut instinct comes in, though.
What if you get it wrong?
Well,
And
exactly, yeah.
what if I spend all this money and it
Yeah.
doesn't do what I wanted to do, or it needs to be nicer? And again, that's where you need some, what they call in psychology, warm authority. That's where you need somebody who says, you know what, this is what you need. And I really believe, based on what you've given me here, and this of course is why we designed that original survey back in the day, was trying to get a good sense of you as a family and a person, and you and your values.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you can sort of wrap your arms around the family and say, right, this is what we can design together to create an existence for you that's in line with your values.
Sure.
It's not easy, because a part of you has to give up the idea that if I could just create this fantastic aesthetic environment, then I'll be happy. Because that's not easy.
No.
And also, it's not linear.
No.
So sometimes you might get it wrong, or sometimes it won't work all the time. But that comes back to what I was talking about at the beginning, which is about being gentle with yourself and always trying to nudge yourself in the right direction through, and your environment's a key driver.
But also, I think your environment, it needs to be able to adapt and adjust. So it's not that you do it and that's it. It's a static thing. It should be able to evolve. It should be able to adapt. And I think now, particularly having gone through these few months, we can all see how important having that kind of flexibility at home is for people, whether it's trying to find space for yourself, trying to share a space for working, whatever it might be. So that's really, really important too for people at the moment. Really, really amazing. And then I think, Michael, another really interesting thing was sort of people's habits and how they've changed since lockdown. And just from the survey, I'm just going to open it up here. Really interesting, I think, that when it comes to arguments at home, which was one of the questions that we asked, it was, I think, a whopping 89% of people having arguments about tidying up. So I suppose this is everybody underneath everybody's feet, and comes back to our discussion about clutter. And then so many people, the kitchen area, I suppose, being the one place that they're all interacting, and nearly 40% of people saying that they're planning on a kitchen refurbishment. And then nearly 70% of people super concerned about budget. And I think actually we got a lot of questions in about this, and you just sort of touched on it, the whole idea that they're about to embark on a project, they are working with somebody, but they're terrified it's not going to work out how they hope, and looking for sort of reassurance around that. I suppose it's very difficult, really it does come down to trying to find somebody that you get on with, to work with. I think that's the most important thing at all, because this is a relationship really at the end of the day, and particularly when it's something so personal as your home.
And it's about finding that person that you're comfortable expressing those fears with. I think it's really important, because you might not get it right. The one thing is certain. It's not going to be perfect. I think we need to step away again from that search for perfection that sort of permeates our existence in the 21st century. I spoke to somebody recently who has moved countries a couple of times, and she made a very interesting point. She said, everywhere you go, there are good things and bad things. And it's your choice about what you look at. Now, of course, you're designing something. It's not going to be perfect, but if you start off in the understanding of the kind of life you want to live, what do you want this place to do for you, not what do you want it to look like?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if you start off wanting with an idea of what you want it to look like, that's easy. I mean, you can just give a picture and say, make it like that, and people can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But is it going to do for you what you want it to do for you? And that's what design is. And I, personally speaking, and would never have really fully appreciated until I spoke to at some of the events like the quantity surveyors and all these people, how much anxiety can be relieved by information from people who cost money to employ, and of course the anxiety drives avoidance. So when you're anxious about something or you're worried that it's not going to work out, what we tend to do is avoid information, or we seek information that confirms our bias or whatever. But what you tend to do is just avoid and bury your head in the sand. Whereas if you talk to the quantity surveyor, I was completely amazed talking to him about the amount of detail they can provide based on information and plans of an architect, how much information they can supply, and what that does to your fear level. Your fear just goes really, really goes down, because the amount of uncertainty then begins to disappear.
Yeah.
And also they can say, when we were talking to the guy, was it Rocky, the lighting chap?
Rocky was on last week, actually. Fascinating stuff about lighting.
Talking to him about it, just having somebody come in with that authority and say, and bearing in mind you have to pay this guy, but they're going to come in and say, sorry, that's not going to work. You're not, I mean, for us, for example, when we get that 1 hour in the evening, I like to read, and now I've had to put, because I like sort of dim lights, but I've had to put this lamp behind the couch a little bit. It's a little bit in the middle of nowhere. It's a bit awkward because the light is in front of me rather than behind me in our apartment, and you turn the light on and the book is in a shadow. And that's a subtle driver of behavior. It just makes you less likely to pick up the book and more likely to turn on the TV. And if Rocky had been there on day one, he would have told me to put the light back there. A very simple thing, but it would just make living a little bit different.
Yeah, and it does come down to planning. I suppose the more planning you can do before a project, before you start a project, the more certainty you're creating and the less stress that goes with it.
And you'll understand what it'll cost.
Exactly.
The other big fear is budget.
It's a huge fear, and just seeing here from the survey, it is a huge fear still for people. Yeah.
Like I sound like a salesperson for quantity surveyors, but I really didn't understand the resolution they can give you, like down to the nails and the screws.
Yeah.
There's going to be nothing's going to jump out. A builder's not going to walk out hand on hips and say, well, geez, that's going to cost another $5,000. All that uncertainty disappears. So you're not dreading the phone ringing because you know from the beginning. And of course, if you watch the programs where people are building the outlandish houses, if you've got the windows coming from Sweden and they're costing 20,000 more than they thought, and they're 6 weeks late, we begin to understand that, or feel that that's the only way a building project can proceed. But actually, you can plan it out of existence, and then it can actually just run exactly the way you want it to run.
No, that's it. And having all those decisions made, when it comes to finishes, when it comes to anything that needs to go into the house, so they are done, you're not going to have to make those decisions under pressure. That's a really important thing as well. So
thank you.
Yeah. No, fascinating. Fantastic. Brilliant. And then, Michael, you touched on it there very briefly, just about saying that you love to read. And I think if we are thinking about our spaces and thinking about how we want to use them, are there things we can do to drive behavior? So for example, I mean, we chat about, say, you want your kids to read more, whatever that is. What advice would you have there?
I know I probably sound like a broken record when I say this, but one of the things that just in conversation people complain about is not sleeping well and being on the phone in bed. This is it's a perennial problem. So don't have your charger there. Just charge it somewhere else. I say that to everybody. Put your charger in the kitchen. Charge your phone there overnight, and then it just makes you think about, okay, well, maybe I'd read a book in bed. If you read a book in bed, you'll get tired more quickly because you don't have the blue light, etc. And don't try and change the world. A couple of little things that will help to push you in the right direction. And an easy example is reading. Make it comfortable, make the light work for you, and have the books at hand, and have the TV remote somewhere else. Have a place for the TV remote that it goes, that turning on the TV is a thing you have to do. rather than just a thing that happens. And that for me is a big driver of behavior, because if sit on the couch, what's the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to sit on the couch. And what's the first thing I'm going to do from here? I'll do whatever's easy because it's difficult to, I'm tired in the evening and whatever it is. So, but what you have to do, the step before that, is understand what life do you want to have? What would you rather do more of, and what would you rather do less of? And once you can start with that, you can sort of reverse engineer your space, rather than a mistake we made recently. We bought two couches that have this a USB charger at the side, which is terrible because you can plug your phone in, but it has an automatic lifting up of the feet thing, and it's wonderful. And I've watched TV on that all day. But if I have a cup of tea, I've got nowhere to leave it, because we used to have a little table that we, like a little drum that would sit in front of the couch, and when you lift up the feet, now that just knocks it over. So I can't have a cup of tea. So I had to go getting another table, and that's over on the wrong side. And it's a small thing, but it's the kind of thing that just annoys me in the evening.
Sure, yeah.
And that's it's just about work. I didn't work backwards. I saw the couches and I bought them because they had shiny blue light at the side.
So you didn't have a plan, Michael. You didn't have a plan.
I had no plan, and now I have to because they're electric. I have to run a cable to the couches so that they'll work. They're not mechanical.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
So that's another thing that annoys me, because it runs under the dog's bed, and I worry about the dog lying on an electric cable bed. So that's it's innocuous enough.
Yeah.
But it's actually, they are the little stressors that make up your day, and you think you could just plan around those.
Yeah, exactly. No, forward planning. No, that's excellent. Fascinating. And then finally, just because I don't want to take up too much of your time this morning, I know you're very busy this morning. When it comes to finding headspace, because I think I was asked to write an article recently about how to find space at home. And, I'm racking my brain about this, thinking, well, for most people, you can't manufacture space. You just can't do that. That's tricky. But actually, I think what we're all craving is headspace. It's not necessarily often that you need physical space. It's just space for yourself. So is there anything that you can kind of recommend? And does it depend on different people's personality types, what that would mean for them? Are different environments better for different types of personalities?
You know that phrase, happiness is an inside job. I mean, happiness is an inside job. It doesn't matter where, okay, I'm not saying it doesn't matter what your space is. Obviously it does. If there are 10 children in the room, you're not going to do some, meditation or whatever it is. But we always advocate mindfulness. And mindfulness doesn't require the absence of stimuli. Mindfulness requires the tuning into the stimuli that are present, and making active choices about how you deal with that. It's not about the past or the future. It's not about closing your eyes and meditating. It's about just awareness and acceptance in the moment. And I think a huge proportion of this whole space is taken up with the idea of getting away from life. And if only I could just get a room with serenity and whale sounds and a mountain and rivers and candles. That's not reality. And the search for that, and the constant saying, oh, I would do it if I had that, is a very destructive force. Rather accepting, say, do you know what, when I have a shower is a perfect opportunity for mindfulness. When you're going about your day-to-day business in the normal day-to-day way, there is opportunity in that for mindfulness and for choosing your responses to things. Again, comes back to talking about choices. It's not about, if people took nothing else, it's not about opting out of your day-to-day, because that's not the world we live in, right? You can't opt out. It's rather about finding the little spaces where you can make choices about how you interact with the environment and interact with people. And you begin to understand that you have lots of choices about that. And if you stop for a moment and think, if you feel any sort of unease, I know Brezzy taught me this thing about, you pinching this hand or this hand. Is this something about the past, or is this something about the future? And just labeling thoughts as they come. That's about the future. That's about the past. Neither of them are any good to you right now. And you can do that anywhere. And you can do that sitting at a meeting with your hands under the table when you're on Skype or you're on Zoom or whatever it is, and you're worrying about what's happening, or you're worried about what you said. That's the past and the future. So I think maybe people just don't have to search for the perfect time in the perfect space. It's available to you, but it's an inside job, really.
No, it is fascinating. I think, like what you said earlier as well, there's two ways of looking at every situation. You can see it negatively, positively, and that is the struggle for people. But yeah, no.
And don't try and create the perfect world. It's people are messy.
Absolutely.
And the world is a messy place, and we accept that.
Yes, and I think through this period, hopefully, more and more of us are accepting that. Look, it is okay. This is life. This is how it is, and
that's it. And we can flourish and thrive anyway, along with it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Michael, thank you so much. It's been amazing. So many wonderful insights there.
It's a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. No. Thank you so much, and thanks everybody who joined in. Thank you all of you who completed the survey. Really interesting, and hope you enjoyed the rest of your weekend. Michael, thanks so much. Take care.
Not at all.
Bye bye.
Mind yourself.
Bye bye. You too. Bye bye. Bye.